It was a quiet, moonless night when Clara found herself alone in her grandmother's old house. Her grandmother had passed away a few weeks ago, leaving the place to Clara, who was now cleaning out the last of her belongings. The house was a century-old, creaky thing, filled with dust and the scent of mothballs. But one thing Clara couldn't explain was the large, antique mirror that stood in the hallway, covered with a dusty cloth. It was a beautiful piece, with intricate silver filigree that glimmered faintly in the dim light. Clara had never noticed it before. She was certain it hadn't been there the last time she visited. Curiosity gnawed at her. She tugged the cloth off the mirror, and for a moment, she just stood there, staring at her own reflection. But then, something felt off. The air seemed colder, heavier. Her reflection wasn't quite right. She blinked. At first, it was subtle. Her reflection seemed a split second slower than her movements. She moved her hand, and it followed. She tilted her head, and it did the same, but there was something else. It felt deliberate, as if the reflection was waiting for her to do something. Clara's heartbeat quickened. She took a step closer to the mirror. Her reflection mirrored her every move, but when she leaned in, it smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was wide, too wide, and stretched unnaturally, the edges of the lips curling up beyond human limits. Clara gasped and stepped back, her hand instinctively reaching for the cloth to cover the mirror again. But before she could grab it, her reflection shook its head. Slowly, deliberately, it shook its head as if warning her. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. She turned around. The house was still. No sound, not even a creak from the floorboards. But the feeling of being watched washed over her. She turned back to the mirror. Her reflection wasn't standing still anymore. It was now leaning toward her, its hand reaching out toward the glass, its fingers pressing against the surface as though it was trying to break through. Clara's pulse raced. She staggered backward, her legs trembling, and then the reflection did something she wasn't expecting. It winked. She turned and ran out of the hallway, straight for the door. But before she reached it, she heard a soft, familiar voice from behind her. Clara, it sounded like her grandmother's voice. She spun around. The hallway was empty, but the mirror, she could see her own reflection still standing there, staring at her with wide, hungry eyes. The reflection mouthed something. "Come closer." Clara bolted toward the front door, throwing it open, the cool night air hitting her like a slap to the face. She never looked back. The next morning, when she returned to the house to gather the last of her things, the mirror was gone. There was no trace of it, no sign it had ever been there, but Clara could still hear the faint whisper in her mind. Come back, come closer.